Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the owner of Third Eye Comics, a series of incredible comic shops in Maryland and Virginia. It's Steve Anderson. Thanks for coming on, Steve.
Hey, David. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you bringing me on.
So it's Friday, 3-ish, 3:15-ish over. I don't even know. Where are you? Or what state are you in right now?
I'm in Annapolis, Maryland. That's where our God, it feels weird saying this. Our corporate headquarters and our flagship store is in Annapolis, Maryland.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's funny. I started doing the intro and I was like, I need a Where's Waldo, but with Steve in it.
We have locations currently right now just in Maryland and Virginia, but that may be changing in the near future.
Oh my. Well, there you go. Well, so how's this Friday going? I mean, Fridays seem like I would say like a moderately not busy day for a comic shop, but I don't even know if calling you a comic shop is really even fair at this point. You're, as John Hendrick, my pal from Big Bang Comics, described you, a lifestyle store at this point.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. That's really flattering, and I appreciate that. We do sell a lot of different things now, so that's a pretty apt description of what we do. Fridays are busy for us. I mean, Fridays are busy. For me personally, Fridays are real busy because that is FOC day for me.
Oh.
And I still FOC for all of our stores, and that's 5 different accounts. So Fridays are a good day. This is a good time for me to do the podcast though, because this is right after the first wave of FOC.
So you still do all the ordering for the shop?
I do all the FOC. Yeah, I don't do restocks. And I don't do like there's some stuff I still do pre-orders on, like certain toys and things like that, toy purchasing, game purchasing. That's handled by management over at the game store. FOCing though, like for new comic product, I do still handle that for all the Third Eyes.
Interesting. I want to get into this more in a little bit. Let's jump back all the way to the beginning, because I am really interested in you have this, I don't know, I think you have 6 shops right now, right?
Yes.
So you have this, forgive me for saying this Third Eye empire of lifestyle stores these days. I'm interested in what's like the beginning of your comic book story. Like where did everything start for you all the way in the beginning?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, I'm 39. I grew up reading comics and being into things like skateboarding and monster movies and all that stuff because I grew up in the 80s. And the 80s were full of cool things like, cool horror movies, cool comic books, and things like that. But I didn't actually start following comics until I was about 12 years old and I found a comic book store. I was aware of comics, but I was very confused by them as a kid. You'd pick up X-Men and, the Shadow King would have everybody possessed. And at 7 years old, I was just like, why are they fighting each other? I don't get it, or Thor would be a frog. And I'd be like, I don't get it, And when I was about 12, I'd picked up a Wizard, like kind of knockoff magazine called Flux at a drugstore. If anybody has Flux back issues, they should send them to me because I'm trying to find it. But it went for like 6 issues and then it was gone. But they had an article in there about Age of Apocalypse. And this is 94, I think, after everything started to kind of taper off. And I just thought it sounded like the coolest friggin' thing in the world. I found a comic book store, and I was very lucky to find a comic store with a really, really cool manager. I was an old hippie guy, and he was every week I'd go in, X-Men Alpha, X-Men Alpha, X-Men Alpha, and he wasn't there. And then finally the week came out where it actually came out, and they sold out the day of, and he pulled it out of somebody's box who hadn't been in 2 months and was like, hey, I'm going to do this for you. Now, we do this thing called a pull box, and I can make sure you get everything connected to this book. You want me to do that? And I was like, dope. Yeah, let's do it. And that's where it started. And from there I would go in and I'd read about stuff in Wizard and, I'd pick up comics, and that's where I started. And I was in love. Like that became my passion. And then many years later, that same store, I ended up getting asked if I wanted to work there part-time. I was about 19, maybe 18, and started working the counter and did that for quite some time. Then got a little bit older, was about 23, got convinced to try and go do something else by the friends and the family, and didn't quite like it that much. quit that job and went back to working at the comic book store. And that's when I was kind of like, all right, I'm gonna open my own store. I'm gonna try and do this, and started selling my own collection online at conventions and raising cash with the misconception that I would be able to get a small business loan to open a comic book store. Now, at the time in 2006, 2007, that was not something that they looked friendly on. Now, banks are a lot friendlier to us comic book stores now because we've had about 15 years of mainstream acceptance. But back then, Iron Man hadn't even come out yet. I raised my cash, had a guy who I knew who had a store that he was closing down, asked if I wanted to buy his fixtures. I bought his fixtures and opened Third Eye in that store 2 days later. Convinced all my friends, and at the time I was making music, I was in a band, and I convinced my bandmates to basically work for free and help me remodel the store. And we we did that in about 48 hours, and that was the first Third Eye Comics, and that was born April 2008.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, the week before Free Comic Day.
I actually, it's funny. I just had Brandon Schatz on not that long ago from Variant Edition up in Edmonton. And I'm pretty sure he and Danica opened their shop around not 2008, but like right before Free Comic Book Day. That feels like the ultimate trial by fire starting point for a shop.
It absolutely is. Well, it's a great time to open a store because, I mean, it's a great, every year our anniversary is on Free Comic Day, like, that's great, so every year, not only is it Free Comic Day, but it's also like this year will be the 14th year anniversary of Third Eye, and that'll be the first Saturday in May, knock on wood.
Mm-hmm. So you got the fixtures from that place. Did you move into the same space or did you move into a different space?
We did. Yeah. We talked to his landlord and we moved in, and it was a very small store. It was about 800 square feet. And we just, we pulled up the carpet and we didn't know what we were doing. So we got like paint thinner to get the glue off the floor and ripped the tiles. There's these tiles that were like just almost embedded in the floor. We got those up and then got some concrete paint, painted the floor black, make it look a little clean, didn't show dirt as bad. Painted the walls Third Eye blue, which is what we call the color that we use in our stores.
Mm-hmm.
And all of our stores still have that same blue color for the paint jobs. And then we took whatever inventory that he had left us and basically or sold to us, I guess, and just hit the ground running. And it was literally just that, and that's how it started.
I imagine that there was two things that were working to your advantage. One, despite the fact that it would be insanely stressful to open on near Free Comic Book Day, like that's a great way to get people to come to you right off the top. You're going to have people coming there. The other thing is I imagine being in the same space that people already knew was a comic shop before probably made it kind of ensured that you were going to have some level of
we picked up
customers. Yeah.
We picked up his subscribers and all that stuff. You know what I mean? And that was part of the deal too. I was like, you got your phone book, like let me go through your binder. And and that's what I did that Monday. I called every single person that had a pull box and I said, hey, my name is Steve. I just wanted to let you know that your new comics will be here on Wednesday. And, so-and-so was an awesome dude. We're still tight with him. And we are actually still tight with him. He's actually a pull box subscriber of mine in one of my Virginia stores.
Nice. That's awesome.
So, it's cool. Like it was really a good way to start, because we had that support and it was a lot of fun. Like, those early days, like, I was 26. So, granted, I don't know if I could pull as many late nights as I did then now, but it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
I just got a notification of like 10 years ago. I posted a picture of me as the dude from Big Lebowski, head to toe in that, walking around with a decanter of White Russian, like just like great. Everywhere, just drinking from this decanter of White Russians. And
that's amazing.
That's another thing I don't know if I could do anymore. It's just like,
no,
we're not built for this anymore, Steve. That once upon a time we could open shops and we could drink an entire decanter full of White Russian and it would be okay. No longer.
No, definitely not.
I want to backtrack a little bit. I just want to say, starting with Age of Apocalypse feels like the equivalent of starting a shop on Free Comic Book Day for me. I don't know why that is. It just feels like starting on overdrive from the jump, because I remember I was 10. I'm 2 years younger than you. I was 10 when that dropped, and it was like
Yeah.
the most important thing that happened to me in 1994. It was so insane.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, like that was. I remember I was reading about it, and this magazine, Flux. It was like Wizard, but it also talked about like music. So it got me into like obituary and a bunch of good death metal, and like it talked about video games, and like I didn't even pick it up for the comic books. I picked it up, I think, for the video games, and man, Age of Apocalypse. I showed that picture of Wolverine with like the one hand missing,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then like just from there, like I would really lucked out with a good comic guy, because the guy that was in there, I would see something on the counter and I'd be like, what's Hellboy? And
Yeah.
he'd be like, oh, Hellboy is really cool. And then I would get into Hellboy. So I'm like 12 or 13 and I'm reading Bone, I'm reading Hellboy. I remember buying the Bone imagery issues when they first started coming out. I had to get my so when I was 13 at the time, I had to get my grandmother to take me to get Stray Bullets. But I really wanted to read Stray Bullets. I was reading Stray Bullets. Like it was a great time. Like the late 90s were a really good time to get into comics.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like looking back on it, it's such a weird time for comics itself. Besides 1996, I did this whole project on trying to like look back at like Marvel's the best Marvel comic for my entire life for every year. And
That's cool.
1996 was like a hellscape. It was so weird. It was like they were going through bankruptcy and the creative juices were gone. It was just completely weird. 94, 95, and then 97, 98, 99. Basically every year that wasn't that was awesome.
Yeah.
It was super fun. But
Yeah, it really was.
I think, okay, so you worked in a shop. You started working in a shop when you were 19, you said. And then
Yes.
it seemed like maybe besides like your family being like, what are you doing with your life? Which
Yeah.
in their face,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Your family's great.
Well, no, it's funny, but yeah, I mean, like I had it beaten over my head, like this is not a good idea. This is, and like my family, I come from a pretty blue collar background, and like shops and things like that, like you know what I mean, like not so much. And if you were going to college, if it wasn't for computers, they didn't want to hear it. Like
Yeah.
you were like, well, I want to go take some classes at community college. Like originally I wanted to go to community college for journalism when I was like 15 or 16. And they were like, they're like computers. And I was like, I'm not good at computers, And like, they're like, well, go learn a trade, And like, so yeah, no, but now like,
I'm sure that they see your vision now.
yeah, yeah.
So I am interested in that time when you worked at the shop before you opened Third Eye. And one of the things, I mean, obviously you probably weren't like, in 13 years, I'm going to be opening my 7th shop where I'm actually going to be buying stuff from people. I mean, there's no way you saw that. But during your time when you're actually working in shops, did you see something in the way that comic shops were run that maybe you wanted to do a little bit differently? Because that's one thing I think that is interesting about Third Eye is you do what others do extremely well, but you've also added your own flavor to it. Did you always want to have your own flavor to the comic shop setup?
The own flavor thing, definitely. Like I don't want to ever say that like I want, like I thought in terms of I could do this better or anything like that, because I don't want to disrespect anybody. Everybody has different ways, and there are stores that are completely different than mine that do phenomenal, and that's it. But I mean, the one thing for me is, like, obviously I want this to be something that I can make a living from. I want it to be something that the people who work for me can make a living from. But the one thing that's consistent from day one is just I like to have fun with it. And like I like to make it like all kind of feel the way that I felt when I would go into comic book stores or record stores or skate shops when I was young. So not saying it's a throwback to older stores or older, skate shops or record stores or whatever, but like there was a sense of discovery and wonder when you went into those stores where, especially the first time, you were a little nervous. You were a little like, what am I going to find? And I like to be the pleasant surprise. I like to basically be like, number one, I like to have even more than what people expect. And number two, I like it to be just as cool as they thought it was going to be. And number three, I like everything to be just way friendlier than what they may have thought it was going to be. Because when you go to any new place, whether it's a restaurant, and this is still true for myself, like if I go to a new restaurant, if I go to somewhere else, it's new, it's different. You're already a little like, ooh, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you go in there and like that good attitude, that good positive energy makes all the difference in the world between it being a good experience and a bad experience. And all the stuff that we do that's unique to Third Eye, whether it's the branding or the way that we, approach customer interactions or the way that we stock, all of those are the side effect of being able to provide people with an experience that is unlike any other, because we want it to be as special as they think going to a comic shop should be.
Yeah.
That's what we want. Yeah.
I've never been to Third Eye, but one thing that's always come across in our conversations, and also just in how I have these like inane questions I ask you all the time for my features about retail or the state of retail and everything. And you always have such enthusiasm for whatever you're talking about. And it's interesting because like, I think I said this to a creator once, but it was like, sometimes you can tell that people love comics, but they're not still in love with comics. It's like a relationship. Right. They've been kind of jaded by it. And it strikes me is you have this sort of, I'm sure the people that you hire probably share this, where you have this like infectious energy that kind of permeates throughout your shop. And that's the thing I think you're talking about, is like when you first go into a shop, it's like a world of wonder. It's when you're
Yes.
a kid and you go in there and you're just like, I want to know everything. And
yes,
it seems like you kind of approach your shops with that kind of mentality.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. And I mean, like, honestly, like, it's just, I wake up every day and I have the coolest job in the world. I am so friggin' thankful that this worked out. And, and anytime something crazy happens, whether it's, what we went through with the COVID and the stores not being able to open, or what we're going through right now with distribution, like, I just look at it as a way to get better and to just do this longer. Cause I ain't going nowhere else. I mean, this is it, like, yeah. I love it, and it's cool as shit. I mean, like it's still weird, like having like offices, my corporate headquarters, like I can go out there and I can plaster the conference table and like band stickers and like monsters, and like I can do that. Like, yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. I can have a TV in the conference room that's just streaming horror movies all day, and I can do my FOC and listen to death metal. You know what I mean? Like, I'm really thankful. I get to talk to people about cool stuff, and that makes it easy to stay excited. Now, granted, I know that like we've reached a level where we have, this stuff, but even when we were in the small store and I was working in the store 7 days a week, 10, 12, 13 hours a day, it was still dope to me to be able to wake up and be like, you know what? I can talk to people about Batman, and if I want to get my throat tattooed, I can do that too, and like, I love it.
I don't know how my office would respond to me getting my throat tattooed. I don't think they would like that.
Exactly.
The good news is I work from home, so they would never know. I could just put on a filter where they would.
There you go. A turtleneck.
So when you were first starting, did you know that you wanted to get into these other product lines that you were enthusiastic about? Like, vinyl is such a fit both for your shop, but also for you as a person. Was that something right. you maybe fit your plan to distinguish Third Eye, or was that something that just kind of came up as you found success?
Just came up. I a lot of these things, whether it's the vinyl or, I never thought we would sell toys at the level we do.
You have an entire shop dedicated to games, don't you?
We do. And I never thought that would be a thing. But I mean, like, really what it comes down to is everything starts with a seed, and everything starts with like kind of like a one of two things or both, which is basically like there's an audience. So we should have this thing for the audience. And then that's one seed. Or I think this is cool and there might be an audience, and that's the other seed. One of those two seeds gets planted. So with games, I've never been like personally a big game guy, but I know that games are a perfect match for our kind of business. And I mean, I do think they're cool. So we carried a very small selection of games, and then that was popular, and it just kept growing. Records is kind of like something that's on the other end of the spectrum, where basically I loved it. I collected records. I mean, every time that I'd make it out west, I'd go to Amoeba Music and just like look at them and say, I want to be this for comics, and like I loved it. But I never ever thought in a million years, I didn't even know where to get records. You know what I mean? And as we were growing a few years ago, I had talked to a few different people and asked just a few. It always starts with me just asking people questions. I'm like, where do you get records? And what do you do with that? And then I'll see like a little something that I might carry that's adjacent. Like, we carried Henry and Glenn, the mini comic about Henry Rollins and Glenn Danzig,
Hmm.
and that did really well. So then we added a few more zines. Then we added a few books on like music subcultures, and those did really well. And then we added T-shirts, and we had like the Wu-Tang shirts and the Danzig shirt and all that, and that did really well. And then as those things are doing well, I'm like, okay, cool. There's potential for this to work. I start asking people questions, and then usually there's a moment where I'm just like, well, fuck it, let's give it a shot. And records, along with a lot of the other categories that we added after COVID, um, a lot of those came to be because COVID pretty much made half of our game store unusable, and we were able to bring them in. Then we saw they were successful, and then we started using it. We started bringing them into the other stores,
Hmm.
and that's kind of how it starts. So everything starts small, and nothing ever like I don't sit down and have like the next 5 years plotted out. I mean, I do plot out a little bit for in advance, but I don't look at something and say this is where I'm going to be with this, until I know. And then when you know.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like basically you're just reading what your customers respond to and then adjusting to it on the fly.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a huge part of it, and if it matches up to something I think is cool, that makes it, it makes it more fun, but that's just a bonus. But I mean, like, it really is about just kind of, figuring out. I mean, we started carrying movies, Blu-rays, DVDs, and they're doing really good, like, which is crazy.
Yeah, well, it's funny because my wife and I were walking around. We were grocery shopping the other day, and we have this local grocery place called Cars, and they used to have an entire area just for movies, and it's gone now. And it
Yeah.
is interesting because you have things like vinyl, and you have things like Blu-rays with like like the awesome steel books or like Criterion
Yep.
collections and stuff like that.
Yep.
All that
Exactly.
all that stuff is nerd stuff. It's just
Yep.
nerd stuff for a different thing or a different
Exactly.
audience. And it's interesting because like that was one of the things that I talked to when I did a recent interview with John Hendrick and Bruno Batista from Dublin's Big Bang Comics, as you know, listeners.
Yeah. Great guys.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is we were talking about diversification of product and why that's helpful and everything. And it's like maybe not every comic customer or every Star Wars toy customer or whatever customer is going to want to buy the other products. But if like, let's say 5% of those customers decide, hey, maybe I'll check out comics, or hey, maybe I'll check out, getting some vinyl records, doing something like that. That type of overlap is super powerful and is just all additive. It's great.
Exactly. And then it helps you develop new audiences.
Hmm.
Like we have we have people who come to our store just for props, horror props. You know what I mean? Like and that's wild.
Like, what does that entail?
So there's a bunch of companies right now. It's weird. There's literally a fandom for everything now, which I think is great. But there's a bunch of companies that are year round. They make masks, and there are people who collect just masks, Halloween masks, and we have I think 240 masks in stock now.
Wow.
So you walk into yeah, like it's crazy, and it's like it's everything from like Eddie from Iron Maiden to like Sam from Trick or Treat, and they're nice deluxe masks, and like Trick or Treat Studios is probably the most famous of the companies, but there's a bunch of little ones too. And then they have props, you know what I mean? So like you can life size Chucky dolls and Annabelle dolls and things like that. So there's this whole subculture around horror memorabilia and horror fans that now comes to our store. And then guess what? They might buy a record, or they might go next door and they might buy a graphic novel. They might get, like whatever, like what's the word? Soul Plumber, the new book with the guys who do Last Podcast on the Left.
Mm-hmm.
And it's our job to properly make sure that each audience is aware of these adjacent things that they might like. So like, we have D&D masks from Trick or Treat Studios coming in. Well, that works out great because we sell a lot of D&D, and then you're able to kind of cross pollinate these audiences and get them excited about lots of different things. And, and the best part about it is that if you do have a category that might lag, like say, like you're having a soft year for comics, you have other categories that are still going to be performing.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I do want to comment on the horror props thing because my wife and I went to Spirit Halloween recently, and they had animatronic, or whatever the hell you would call it, large figures from killer clowns from outer space.
Oh yeah, dude.
It blew my mind because when I was a kid, I watched that movie like a million times, and I was like, this movie is insane. Like, they are literally drinking people's blood through crazy straws while they're in cotton candy. And I always thought it was like this insane movie that I really liked. And I'm like, now people want to buy the clowns from Killer Clowns from Outer Space? What?
Literally just got a life-size version of the cotton candy cocoons in for our store.
Oh my God. It's insane. Also,
it's literally life-size.
I was just going to say that I just discovered that apparently that movie is well-reviewed. Rotten Tomatoes, 76%. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Who knew? Who knew?
That's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so you started with one shop in 2008. You're now at 6. You're about to open your 7th, Third Eye Buys. I am interested in how that progressed. And also, like, actually, you mentioned something I thought was really interesting. It sounds like some of your shops are next to each other.
Yeah, so 2 of them are.
Okay.
And Third Eye Buys will be close to those 2. So the Annapolis store was the first Third Eye. That's our flagship store. That's like the destination. If you're in the Mid-Atlantic, and you're coming to DC, Maryland, or Virginia, and you're into nerdy stuff, you're probably going to stop at the Annapolis Third Eye. That's our first superstore. It's 14,000 square feet combined. It's a game store and a comic store. They're right next door to each other. 2 separate stores, but they're right next door to each other.
It reminds me of Austin Books and Comics. I don't know if you've been down there.
Yes, no, I have. That's a great store. Yeah. Very, very, very similar in terms of that kind of idea. So that's the Annapolis stores. We opened the second superstore, but it wasn't a superstore until this year, in Lexington Park, Maryland, which is our Southern Maryland store. That's in the southern end of the state. And that was in 2011. We opened that store. And that store, again, started very, very small. And, 10 years in, it started doing really well about a year and a half ago. And we were able to expand that store into what we call our superstores. And the superstores are basically, in terms of square footage, if it's over 6,000 square feet, we consider it a superstore. And it has a full line of games. It has a full line of comics and graphic novels, full line of toys. Like, basically, those are the complete experience. The superstores also carry a couple things in volume that the other stores don't carry, like skateboards and records and things like that. The other stores have a much more curated selection of those. Then in 2018, we opened our third store, which was the first of the 2 Virginia stores. That's in Mechanicsville, Virginia. And then in 2020, we opened our Waldorf store, and we opened our second Virginia store. And honestly, we've been moving a lot quicker post-COVID, I think, than we were moving before in terms of expansion. Mostly because when COVID happened, it really kind of gave me this sense of like, shit or get off the pot. You know?
Now's the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. You may have heard of Bad Idea, the experimental comic book publisher that's rolling deep with titles from electric talents like Matt Kint, Mark Russell, Marguerite Sauvage, and more, and doing it with oversized, ad-free, over-the-top releases you can only find at select comic shops around the world. There's no variants, trades, or digital versions either, so if you want one of their big Final 5 releases that are being released throughout the rest of 2021, make sure to visit badideacorp.com to find a comic shop near you or to pre-order a copy online. Do so soon because rumors are saying Bad Idea is over, so this might be your last shot. And now, back to the show. It's really interesting hearing about your shops because, like, the superstores, it seems like, I don't know, this is terrible. I hate to compare it, but it's like Walmart versus Super Walmart. I mean, it's just like
Yes.
the one that has like the ordinary stuff versus the ones that's like full out like extravaganza. This one has groceries, this one has this one has everything.
Exactly.
But okay, so obviously every shop is different to a certain degree, even if you own it.
Yes.
Because the clientele is going to be different. What they want is different.
Yes.
You're going to have overlaps. But I am interested in how different are each of your stores in terms of the products you order because of the clientele? Is it still pretty much the same shop by shop, or is it pretty dictated by the client or by your customers?
So in regards, I mean, it is really different based on the store and the clientele. The first year of opening any store is a lot of just figuring it out, and it's you really don't make money on the stores for the first couple of years, because you're really just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. Even if you think you really don't. And I mean, I'm still, I mean, like my Virginia store that just opened last year, Short Pump, that store I'm still figuring out. It really depends on just how long it takes you to figure it out. With that being said, there are certain things that are uniform across the stores, obviously, but for the most part, I mean, each store really does have a different kind of thing. So like, I have one store where is very much big two superhero heavy, and everybody there likes cover A. I have another store, they love the variants, like, so you'll see a book at one store where if we sell out of the cover A, that might hurt the sales on the book. You know what I mean? So I have to order cover B's very, very tight at that store. But then we have another store where I actually, will order aggressively on the cover B and the cover C because there's people who buy all of them. And that can make the difference between, say, Moon Knight selling, 80 copies at one store and 45 copies at another store. And those other 50, those other 35 copies or whatever, those are all variants. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The stores might be the same, have the same amount of subs, but it's just that different clientele. And then I have some stores that are inclined more towards graphic novels and things like that. The superstores are kind of anomalies, especially the Annapolis store. Like, everything sells at those. You know what I mean? Like, so it's actually harder to run a small store than it is the big stores because the small stores can't absorb the stock the way a big store can absorb it.
Yeah. When you open a new shop, though, because it seems like basically the first year or two is effectively you just figuring things out. And
Yes.
normally I think that the idea behind opening a new shop, you would probably want to play it tight because you don't want to take huge losses or anything like that. But because you still have to figure out your clientele, do you normally maybe go a little bit broader just to see what they respond to?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a balancing act. You know what I mean? Like, you start out real broad and you try a lot of different things, and then you realize, okay, this doesn't work. Then you might get a little like gun shy and be like, oh, I'm gonna tighten up, and then you tighten up too much.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I gotta. So it really is a back and a forth of like kind of trying to just turn the knobs just right so you have that perfect mix.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Okay, so when you launch one of these stores, it's not like 2006 or 2008 when you and your bandmates painting the floor black, doing all this stuff like that. Now you have the third eye look, and it's awesome. You have the third eye blue on the walls.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in the black and white floors. Is that a constant?
Yeah.
Where'd that come
every
from?
store has the checkerboard stores. Like I said, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s.
Is it ska?
And ska, man. I have a specials tattoo on me, like, so I mean, ska is a big thing. Like that, I've always liked checkerboard. I think it looks cool. And also too, like, if you think about it, like, it kind of evokes, like, I think everybody has like a cool favorite place. And maybe I'm wrong, but like a restaurant or a diner or a coffee shop or a record store where they had one of those checkerboard floors.
Yeah.
And I feel like that kind of evokes that for a lot of people. And I just think it looks cool.
It does. It does. I mean,
Yeah.
I was a kid who had like those Vans, the black and white slip-on
Yep.
Vans, and I was like
Yep.
really into ska. And so every time I see your floors, I just feel like this warm feeling, which is weird. I mean, I guess that's kind of comes down to it though. Is I'm not saying that all of the products you're involved with are purely based off of nostalgia or something like that, but
No.
to a certain degree, you do everything you do is about evoking a warm feeling in somebody, whether it's the
Yes.
floor or the wall or whatever.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. The entire experience. We want the store to be like a doorway to another reality for people.
So you have all these stores. It sounds like you're doing FOC. There's no way a single human, unless you have like the ability to clone yourself, has the ability to manage all this stuff. How much do you have to rely on your team for like all these stores at this point?
A good deal. I mean, we have 50 some employees now. I think we're up to 60 people on our staff across the company. The small stores are much tighter teams, like say like 5 to 6 people at most. You average probably like 3 to 4. You have like one good, team leader, and then you have like, a couple people that are sales floor people that are just backing them up and doing a really great job. But then, we also have a lot of support staff that, like I said, we've got offices now, which is still weird. My office was my kitchen table for 10 years. Like I have a social media department now, and I have, my mail order downstairs, which I mean, that's something I always forget to mention, but I mean, like our mail order business does extremely well, and I've got 3 or 4 people working down there. Third Eye Buys, I mean, been a big investment of resources because I have to have people who are, specific to, processing collections and dealings with things of that nature and all that sort of stuff.
And also, I imagine for Third Eye Buys, it's like you have to have people who are trying to think of the right way to say this, solid decision makers. Because it's like you don't want somebody spending too much, and you also don't want somebody trying to like fine tune the buy so much that you lose out on something good.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's the thing is it really is tricky. I mean, like I have some really great people that work for me. I mean, like I got to tell you, I mean, like staff is everything. And we have people who have been with us many years. We have people who have only been with us a couple of years, but they're all phenomenal. And I appreciate every single one of them because I mean, like whether it's like, like we have a manager who handles all of our pre-orders, and like that's, that is what she does, and that is a vital thing. We have purchasing managers, that help with like the restocks every week. We have people that really like are doing things, and like it's cool because like, I never thought I'd have like I always thought I could do it all, and I'd say probably about 5 years ago, I started to realize that wasn't quite the case. And then about 2 years ago, I figured out how to properly structure in a way that accommodated that, you know what I mean? And I'm still figuring it out.
Do you need subject matter experts because for like specific product lines? Because I mean, like you already admitted, like games is more of a weakness for you. Like, do you need somebody on
Yes.
staff that's like an expert at each of these things to a certain degree?
Yeah, I mean, like it's very important to have people who know it. The one thing I will say is that people can like learn product better than they can learn good attitudes,
Yeah,
and
that's good.
reliability and customer service. Like I mean, like the number one thing I look for when I'm looking at a team member, and I'm like, cool, is this somebody that I can really take far and really, keep moving them up and giving them new things and finding, and that's part of how we grow is I get these great people working for me, and I'm like, look, I gotta, we got to keep growing to keep giving you room to grow. And good attitude and reliable. That's
Yeah.
the big thing, like those are the two things. Like if you're reliable and consistent, you have a great attitude, you're going to go far.
I remember one time talking to somebody I worked with about potential new hires and stuff. I work in digital media, and
Yeah.
I told them, I was like, there's like a million different articles you can read online about learning Facebook or Google or whatever, but there's nothing that can teach a person how to be curious and want to learn things and to really try hard to like do their job well and come up with new ideas and stuff. Like that's
Exactly.
an innate and I imagine that's the same for all jobs. But before we get into like specifics about comics, I am interested in you have these seven, soon to be seven shops. You have six that are, or five, excuse me, that are or they include comics. How much of
Yes.
your product mix is comics, trades, and graphic novels at this point? Are those five shops still predominantly leaning towards comics, trades, and graphic novels, or is it a little bit more even than it used to be?
So the average size stores, which are usually between 1,500 and 2,500 square feet, for us, those are what I call my satellite stores. Satellite stores are all, I would say 65, 70% comics and graphic novels.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other 30% is made up of games, records, toys, apparel, and other odds and ends. The superstores, I would say, so Annapolis is a unique beast because I'm going to consider Annapolis one store in this case. Um, I would say it's 50-50. It's 50 or maybe actually 40-40 and then 60. You know what I mean? Like, or I'm sorry, 20. My math's all off. but I would say like those stores like a lot of comics, a lot of graphic novels, a lot of, that's a big part of the mix. But then also the games and stuff like that are just as big of a part of the mix.
Mm-hmm.
So that's unique. The St. Mary's store, which is in Lexington Park, that one I would say that one has games and all that in it. It's about 7,500 square feet. I would say probably about 60% comics, graphic novels, maybe 40% everything else. I would probably put it closer to 50-50.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I presume that like 10% of it is just Killer Clowns props or something like that. Well,
I'm working
okay.
on it.
So what's working right now? I mean, I feel like we're kind of in an interesting spot. It feels like there's a lot of hot stuff. I don't know. It's interesting because I've talked to other retailers. One of them, one retailer I talked to said like, I don't really know what the hit is right now. The surefire title you can point to as a recommendation. And I kind of feel that a little bit. I'm interested in, I have this feeling that you kind of make everything sell. You have this like rare gift to do that, but
I try.
What's working for Third Eye in the comic space?
Yeah, so I think kind of like what you're asking is like, what is the Saga right now? What is the
just in general? I mean, like what's cooking with your customers?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of just stuff that's popular. I mean, James Tynion is, I mean, he's it. He's the guy. He is the top draw when it comes to creator names. That move books. Like that's there's other people that definitely still move books. You know what I mean? And there's other names that move books, but James really can't do anything wrong right now. Like, I mean, like, and I'm not trying to, jinx anybody or anything, but like his stuff's doing really well, and it crosses multiple audiences. And this is something that I don't think anybody has seen since Robert Kirkman, where you have a creator now who is hitting the reader audience that only wants to they're cool with just grabbing the trade, that's it. The collector audience who's not reading the thing at all and they just want to collect it and save it. And then the most important audience, the audience in the middle, which does a little bit of both. And that's probably that's an emerging audience that's kind of grown over the last 3 to 5 years that I think is probably the number one area we should all be focusing on, both as publishers, retailers, et cetera, as people who read and collect, and kind of are almost like a hybrid of the two. Traditionally, you either had people who just read, got the graphic novels, that was it, or people who just collected for monetary value, and that was it. But now we have a new audience that is so much more than that. And James is definitely the guy that all three of those audiences goes to, and his streak is going strong. I mean, like it's great. But yeah, I mean, like in terms of like output, I mean, Marvel and DC both, like, I mean, like it's kind of same as it ever was with those guys. They've got some hits, they've got some misses. I mean, Marvel is really interesting to me right now. I was thinking about that while doing my FOC today, because this might be the first time in maybe 5 or 10 years, maybe longer, that like Marvel is completely character driven at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's like creator name, like maybe there's a couple people that might make where you're like this, but it's not like it was where like a certain creator can take a character that may not pop, you know what I mean, and really kind of move it. Now DC is almost the opposite, where basically like it the the books like that have characters that may not pop unless that creator's attached are doing well. And I don't know what the difference is. I don't know how that happened to be or what it is. I don't know if it has something to do with like the Disney Marvel Cinematic Universe approach, but Marvel books definitely move based on character. And then if you've got a really great creator, which Marvel has a lot of really talented people working there right now, then that's the sweet spot. So you take someone who's insanely good, like say Jed McKay, who I think is that it's Jed, right? Jed,
Mm-hmm. Jed McKay, yep.
Yeah, cool. Who I think is phenomenal. And you put him on a character that people think is super dope, like Moon Knight, and man, that book is flying. It is on fire.
Mm-hmm.
But it's on fire because Moon Knight's what got people in the door. Whereas if it was, like a character that wasn't cool, but you had a really great talented creator on it, I don't know if it would move. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
DC, it's the opposite. Like you take a character most people don't know or care about, like Human Target, but you put Tom King on it, and that book's gonna fly. You know?
And Greg Smallwood.
Yeah,
Greg Smallwood's amazing.
So good.
Yeah, he's insane.
Yeah.
I would say that I would probably considered more of a Marvel guy than a DC guy, even though I find myself to be pretty agnostic about this type of stuff. I'm like,
yeah, me too.
I'm weird. I'm like, I would say I'm both a reader and a collector, but I'm like a dumb version of both, where it's like I collect stuff. Like I bought like Eternals #2 recently. Right. Because I love the Celestials and I wanted the first appearance of the Celestials, or like the last few stuff or a few things I've bought have always been like random first appearances of characters that I really love, and it's always like Stiltman or MODOK or something like that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the best way to collect.
But it is interesting because for me, as somebody who exists in this middle, I feel like Marvel is lacking in a bit of juice right now that they had in the past. And I don't know what that is. If there's like almost like an aimlessness to it.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's one of the things that I've kind of said for the last while is the shared universe aspect that kind of connects the whole thing and makes it is probably the secret sauce of Marvel. That doesn't really feel present right now. It's like they're almost existing within their own fiefdoms, except for every once in a while when they have an event that doesn't really get reflected in a lot of other books. There's just something missing, and it's very odd. I don't remember a time. I guess it's probably since Bendis was really like popping up with his events and everything in like 2004, 2005, 2006. Right before then was like the last time where it really felt like this, and it's odd. It's not that it's bad.
It does feel like that, actually.
Yeah, it's not that it's bad. It's just like there's something missing, and I have a hard time pinning down what it is.
Well, the one thing that's kind of cool about it, though, and this is kind of what I think is interesting about it. Whenever Marvel's like this, because you're right, Marvel was like this in the early 2000s. That's a great comparison right there. Like right before New Avengers, when you had like the Jeff Johns Avengers run that was kind of like, out of nowhere and, stuff like that. There's always these books that kind of like just quietly start coming out, and they end up being the books that 10 years from now, people are like, yo, I want to go read that Dan Slott She-Hulk, or I want to go read,
Bendis' Daredevil.
Wave. Yeah, Daredevil, exactly. Like whatever those I'm trying to think of stuff from that period, but that's, that's it. You know what I mean? Bendis Daredevil is a great example. And those books just kind of happen and nobody sees them coming. And then people all of a sudden are like, are you reading this? So I'm not saying that like this period is something I'm crazy about, because I want the fire, man. I want them, I want it all guns blazing, but I think it might be necessary so that we have the next generation of Bendises, the next generation of Brubakers, and if you think about it, Captain America was one of those books.
Mm-hmm.
When Cap came out, that was 2 years before Civil War, maybe. And it just it was good. It was really good. His Winter Soldier was really cool, but it wasn't like catching on fire.
You talking about the Brubaker Epting one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I do think it is interesting because during that stretch, there was a lot of those books that were kind of like, ended up being iconic runs that didn't really have the heat behind them until a certain point. And it was, I don't know. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's been interesting about like James's books, James Tynion's
Yes.
books, is that we're not really seeing that stuff as much in the Marvel DC space. But like, look at Something Is Killing the Children. Something Is Killing the Children was a decent hit when it first launched, but now it's like insane.
It's insane.
It's an empire.
It's insane. And that was honestly the first thing I thought of when you said, like, what's the book? Like, if you had to say, like, what's the Walking Dead? What's the Saga? What's the, Snyder Batman? What's the book that everybody coming into the shop is like, I'm going to read that. And it's Something That's Killing the Children.
Yeah. How are you feeling about Saga with it coming back in January?
I think it's going to be cool. I'm excited about it. I mean, like, I'm a huge Brian K. Vaughan fan. I was working in a shop when he mailed all the shops copies of Y the Last Man #1. And I remember reading that and being like, whoa, you know? So I'm really excited about it. I'm interested to see like how it's going to be received. We did extremely well with Saga at Third Eye. I don't know. I don't know how many of my Saga readers are still here or how many are going to return. So I'm not sure, but I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic because I love that book. And my best case, the thing that I really want to see happen is that it creates enough of a splash that I can sell all those great trades to a whole new generation of readers.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like they're really prepping for it. Didn't they come up with like a slipcase of like all the trades or like hardcovers or something like that? Or was it a compendium? So, yeah. I don't remember what it was, but
yeah,
I don't know. That's going to be a really interesting book because I know that Image emailed like retailers and said that they weren't going to have second prints for the foreseeable future because of the supply chain stuff. And it's really interesting because that's happening right at the same time as Saga coming back. You're going to I don't know, with no second prints, shops are going to have to make some serious bets if they think that Saga is going to be big.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Like I said, I'm hopeful that it makes a monster splash and I can sell lots of Saga trades to a whole new generation of readers. That's what I want to do.
I think it's interesting, though, because a Saga to me is an interesting book because it's one of those books that works well in the book market and the direct market. Yes. And for a lot of people who read it in trades or like the hardcovers and stuff like that, it reminds me of this term for TV, time shifting, for like DVRs and stuff like that. I feel like book market readers are almost like time shifted audiences where this entire time Saga has been gone, but they didn't know Saga is gone. Now that like when they hear that Saga is back, maybe they're going to go into comic shops and say, I want to get the single issue. It's entirely possible the audience has been building at the same time as other people have been upset about it. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see.
It is. Yeah. I think Saga is the perfect transitionary book for people who come into comics through manga. And and I love, that's one of the reasons I love the book so much, is that it really does transition people from one end of the medium to another end of the medium. And then after they read Saga, then there's a whole catalog of amazing Image books from the last 15 years that you can then move them to, whether it's Paper Girls or Black Science or Sex Criminals. Like it's game on, and that's what I want to see.
I feel like Seven Secrets should be a good book for manga fans.
It definitely, it hits them. It's the thing about Saga that's so good, and I think that really kind of hits that audience is it really does give them what they get out of manga that I don't think that, and that's basically like a story that doesn't really have a genre. You know what I mean? There is no set genre, and that's manga, and like, and Saga's not like, it's not reliant on shocking things like, the sex scene with the robot, Prince Robot, you know what I mean? Like, it's not reliant on that, but those things just pop in there. And that's like manga, like a lot of manga is not reliant on stuff like that, but but it'll just be part of the story and it's organic. And I think a lot of people who grow up reading, things that may have like, there's some stuff in manga like Bleach and stuff where you're just like, well, that's pretty violent. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that they're used to that. And then they assume all Western comics can't go that far because, there's IP and things like that. And then they see some, and then they also think that maybe there's a continuity involved. And Saga is perfect because Saga literally, just like a manga, you start with volume 1, you go to volume 2, you go to volume 3, and it's like not quite a sci-fi, but it's also not quite a fantasy. And oh shit, they're not afraid to push the envelope, and it's good,
and
know.
very
And
big
that's
feelings, very big feelings.
Yes,
I think that's important. And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. Macroverse is a next-generation digital comics platform, and one with an astonishing number of comics, with currently over 50 series from over 100 creators on their app, with a 5-star rating both on Apple and Google's app stores. Download the app and binge all their titles, including the Eisner-nominated Remind from Jason Brubaker, Lisa K. Weber's Hex 11, which has been described as Harry Potter meets Blade Runner, or the new queer supernatural adventure series Husk that launches on November 1st. It's just $4.99 a month to subscribe to Macroverse, with proceeds directly supporting the creators on the platform. Keep an eye on the future of Macroverse 2, as 2022 is going to bring an epic upgrade that offers a new level of digital collectability and more, with early adopters able to sign up for more information at macroverse.com. And now, back to the show. On the opposite side, I'm not even necessarily the opposite side. You said one of your shops does really well with variants, and I think it's interesting because, like, you talk to one retailer and variants are the devil. You talk to another retailer and variants are amazing. It's an interesting place because I think the smartest thing that anybody ever told me was this one shop in Seattle told me basically that, like, if you don't like variants, don't order them. It's entirely upon you.
Yep.
It's just like the only person who can tell them that you don't approve of them is you by not ordering them. And I was like, that was kind of a healthy perspective on this. But how are you feeling? Like, all of your shops kind of respond differently to them. Are you feeling okay about the state of variants right now? Too much, too little? Where you at?
I'm fine with them. I honestly, like, it's a category like anything else, and my job is to basically feel out the audience that comes to my store and what they want. And if my audience wants variant covers, they're going to get variant covers. And that's where I'm at with it. I mean, like, I don't have any emotional or personal investment in them in one way or the other. I mean, we order a lot of comics at Third Eye, and because we order a lot of comics at Third Eye, variants do come in handy for us. You know what I mean? Like, it does take the risk out of ordering on certain things and that sort of thing. But honestly, I never stretch just for the variant. I never say, like, cool, I'm gonna, order 500 just to hit that, but if I'm 3 or 4 copies away, I might add 3 or 4 copies, but that's not that big of a thing, it's whatever the audience wants, you know what I mean? And sometimes I try things that my audience doesn't want, and sometimes I take a loss because of that. But that's with every category. I mean, candy, like there's been some brands of candy that I've carried, and I'm like, oh my God, this was supposed to be popular on TikTok, and now I've got 2 boxes of it. You just have to try. It's part of it,
I assume that Reese's peanut butter cups just light up the world. I have, like, very strong feelings about very few things in the world. Reese's peanut butter cups is one of my big. I have, like, power rankings on the best Reese's peanut butter cups. It's ridiculous. I do think it's interesting. Like, I am in my pull list, I have obviously all of my comics in there, but I also have one very specific line in there, and that's no variants. They gave me variants as, like, a treat for a long time, and I was like, stop giving me variants. I just don't want any of it.
Were they incentive variants or cover price variants?
Sometimes both. I mean, not both, but I mean, sometimes, like, it just kind of, like, whatever. It was like they're like, okay, let's give David Harper, like, this cover because he's buys way too much stuff, clearly. And,
got it.
But I mean, it's like sometimes, like, I just prefer the A covers. But it is kind of funny because and this is where it comes down to knowing your product, which is why it's good for FOC and stuff. It's like a good example is like X-Men 21. Mike Del Mundo did a Mystique variant for it.
The Mystique photocopy cover.
I love that cover. And, like, I went out of my way to get that. And every once in a while, it's like there's a cover that hits where I'm like, I really want that. Like Russell Dowderman, like that guy's a hit machine in my book.
Really good.
And it's interesting because I guess, like, deep down, it's like you both have to trust the numbers, but also trust your understanding of the customers when you're doing this type of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely some times where you'll see, I mean, that Del Mundo cover, we ordered probably the same amount of that cover as we did the regular cover, which meant that we ordered a lot more X-Men than we would have ordered, because of the cover, and sometimes you just have a cover like that that's just so dope that you got it. You know people are going to like it. A lot of what we do is projecting what people are going to like,
Right.
and it really just comes down to making sure your staff is tapped into your customer base and making sure that you're tapped into your customer base. And a lot of that just comes from, I don't know. I wish I could, if I could do a step-by-step on how to do that, I'd have more people running Third Eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not something you can teach. You just have to be able to feel it.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the funny things is I'm like known as Mr. Charts. I love my numbers and everything like that. But
Yeah.
I know. I mean, a lot of this stuff comes down to feeling, having the gut instinct that this book is going to connect, or that this cover is going to pop, or this or that, and that's something I think you can really only learn through experience.
Yes, and also just you have to be okay with being wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes there's stuff that you're like, oh my God, that looks like it's going to be so dope. And this happened. Like, and then you get it and it doesn't light the world on fire, and you can't take it personally. You can't be upset. You just have to be like, all right, maybe next time be a little more careful with that one.
Do you have to separate Steve, the person and comic fan, from the person who runs Third Eye sometimes?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, I mean, nothing I like sells. I mean, like, no. No, I'll grant it. There's stuff I like that sells. There's also stuff that I like because it sells, But I mean, like, my favorite stuff, the stuff that like really, really, I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to take this home, is like weird, like reprints of like Basil Gogos art books, and like the new, I took home the new Johnny Ryan this week, and like,
Well, you haven't turned Prison Pit into a massive hit yet?
I tried.
Yeah.
I had a good amount of kids reading it. But like, stuff like that, like I love, like, there's stuff that like, and sometimes stuff will come in style that like people liked, like when Stray Bullets got the compendium treatment. It was at the same time that a lot of like Image stuff was doing well. A lot of crime noir stuff was doing well. And goddamn, I was in the store at that time, and I probably hand sold about 70 of that compendium in the span of a month, because I love Stray Bullets that much.
Man,
but
David Lapham loves you. David Lapham loves you.
Yeah, he probably does. I mean, but no, I mean, I absolutely like, and the joy for me, like the thing that really makes this job fun is being able to match people up to their favorite things, not necessarily match them up to my favorite thing. If it connects and we, like, okay, cool, that's great. You know what I mean? But like, I'm more intrigued by like seeing the pattern of somebody who really likes this artist, and then they like this artist, and I can follow that line between somebody who likes, this artist to this new artist that's coming out, and I really enjoy that end of it. It's fun.
I think it's fun too, because it's like with all the different product lines you have, you can do that across products too, because
absolutely,
you can look at like the movies somebody's buying and the horror props they're buying. You're like, have you read Something's Killing the Children? Have you read this?
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. That's really cool. But okay, I want to talk about some broader things to close.
Yeah.
In December 2020, which feels like 5,000 years ago, you came on the podcast and we talked about supply chain. And that was like, you were the canary in the coal mine before, like, that was really blown up. Now this is like an insane thing. You're because of it, I presume because of it, you're launching Third Eye Buys. I mean, not entirely, but also just because you see a place in the market for this. Why did you think Third Eye Buys was both a necessary and a good idea?
Like most things, it's a combination of kind of just a gut instinct that I saw stuff coming down the pipeline, and then a couple, random things coming together that made it work. Our landlord at the time, next to our offices in our warehouse, he had a space come empty that we could expand into and combine the two into one. And I was like, well, that'd be great for having more warehouse space for processing products. We got all this warehouse space to store and receive product, but man, it gets tight when we got people receiving and processing and trying to cut through back issues and all this stuff. So I did that. And then I started thinking about how for many years I've had in my head basically like, like I really want to have a dedicated way to bring in secondary market product, like old toys, old comics, things of that nature, because it is a bit hard because our store gets so busy to dedicate a staffer to doing that in the store. Now, granted, we could do it the way some of the big record stores do and have like a booth and all that kind of stuff. But I was thinking about how I could do it a little differently, and then COVID happened, and we were seeing a lot of growth, a lot of success in terms of like demand for product, but I think it might have been manga last year when Viz had like the fires. It was a combination of manga and then Marvel was doing weird stuff with their trades on FOC. And I was like, this shit's not going to get better. I was like, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it's probably going to be that way for a little while. So when we had that opportunity come up for the warehouse space, I was like, you know what? The downstairs front end was already set up for retail. I could probably make that into a storefront. And I think I'm going to try this third eye bias thing. And if it doesn't work, I'll quietly sweep it under the rug and no one will ever know it was a thing, And if it works, great. But that was kind of the thing where basically I was like, I want to take a greater control of my supply.
Mm-hmm.
So that way I can, if I want to ramp up, all I have to do is do more local ads and more Facebook ads and more Google ads and, put out road signs and things of that nature. And if I need to pull back, then I just stop, I'm not buying as much, and the biggest area where this is a concern for me is that the way that we have to order now, especially if you're dealing with multiple categories, is we're projecting out way further than we used to. So, I'm ordering stuff in May that's not going to hit me until September, October. And that's, things like wall scrolls, candy, toys, and of course, comics are a little bit different, but there's some similarities. And basically, with that projected ordering, that means that you don't know when that stuff's going to hit.
Mm-hmm.
And if it all hits in the span of 2 or 3 weeks, that's a lot of money going out in what potentially could be a slower time of year. And guess what? September, October, man, Funko dropped a lot of product on us, Wall scrolls finally got here, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm really happy I got them because we're gonna have a lot of product for the holidays when a lot of people don't. But I don't like playing that game. I don't like projecting orders that far out. I would much rather be able to do what I'm used to, which is, every 6 weeks it's a candy order. Every 6 weeks it's a wall scroll order, or with graphic novels, every week we do a restock. You know what I mean? All of that's off the table now, and we don't know what the future holds. But I do know that it's real easy for me to have somebody bring their stuff in, have one of my team give them a price, buy it, and if we bought too much stuff that week, to just stop buying stuff.
Well, I also think it's one thing that the pandemic has created to a certain degree. It's created many things, but this is one of the things it's created is a unique environment where everyone wants to sell their stuff because other people are selling their stuff successfully. And I'm sure that that's creating a lot of people don't know what they have, but you know what they have. So if they come into you and they're like, what do I have? And you're like, you have things that I would like to buy. That's great.
So yes, and that is actually another part of Third Eye Bias that we're going to be doing. There's a huge educational component to the store. We will have a dedicated TikTok for Third Eye Bias and a dedicated YouTube channel. And it's all about basically how to sell, how to ship, how to basically take it all into your hands and sell your own stuff. We're going to have products that appeal. So we're going to sell some stuff in there too. We're not just going to buy, but we're also going to be selling shipping supplies, pop mailers, comic mailers, collecting supplies, all of these things. We're going to be selling stuff. It's going to be almost like a UPS store for nerds in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And
God, my wife would love it. My wife would love it.
we want to really we have the educational component because when you sell your stuff to anybody that has to sell that for a profit, you're going to be selling it at a much lower dollar amount than if you were to sell it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not educated on the fact that there's a certain amount of time and labor and money that goes into making these things sell for what you're seeing them sold for, you're going to feel really bad if you get an offer that comes in low and you're just like, man, I feel like, it's like GameStop. You know what I mean? Um, we want to educate people and we want to give them the tools to where if they want to do the labor themselves and they want to take the time to sell it themselves, they can. And if they don't want to do that, then they can sell it to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it comes from, like I said, like everything that we do, we want people to leave with a good feeling, and we don't want to just say that's all we can offer for it and then they're gone. You know what I mean? We want them to know why that's all we can offer for it, and we want them to know how maybe they could get something else somewhere else, because we know that that will leave a good impression of us in their minds, so that the next time that they think about anything, whether it's they need a Christmas gift or they need, they want to read something that's killing the children or whatever, they're going to come see us. And 9 times out of 10, people are going to see the amount of legwork that goes into selling your stuff, and they're still going to end up selling it to us because they know it's a lot of work. I mean, like selling secondary market items, it is a full-time job for a lot of people who do it on the side.
Let me tell you, over the last year and a half, I've sold a shocking amount of stuff. No comics.
Yeah.
But my mom, we basically went and uncovered all of my Pokemon stuff from when I was a kid because Pokemon was so hot. Sold like all of that stuff, but then also she found like the mother lode. She found 58 unopened Pokemon Fossil series or first edition packs. And anyways, and like I have to admit, that was so exhausting. It was so exhausting selling that stuff. And it was funny. It was also really educational. Like I admitted, I think it was when I was talking to John Hendrick that I didn't know what is it? Comet mailers for comics?
Oh yeah. We call them T-mailers. Some people call them Geminis.
Gemini, that's it.
Everybody has
Gemini.
Yeah, everybody has a different mailer.
I admitted that. Like, do you know Sean Kirkham at Skybound?
Yes.
Yeah, Sean made fun of me because I didn't know what Gemini mailers were, but I was just like, this isn't my world, man. I'm a tourist here. This is not what I do. But it's interesting because it's so much more than just like popping something in an envelope and sending it on if you want to do it right.
It's a lot of time and a lot of labor. I mean, even just the research aspect of being able to know what to sell and what to sell it for, and where to sell it. Like that's a whole thing. So we want to provide a resource to people to where they have those tools, you know what I mean? So that way people can do it themselves and they feel like, they're good. And if it works out and they sell a lot, then hey, more power to them. I'm happy. That's more money for them to spend a third eye,
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get into distribution too much because I'm already holding you for way too long, but
no, it's all good.
I did want to bring up, it's interesting. Third Eye buys through the prism of the supply chain issues and then also some of the growing pains of the distribution world with like, Random House entering the market, Lunar, Diamond being uncertain, whatever you want to call them, all these different things. It seems to me that Third Eye Buys is nice because, I mean, actually, another thing I didn't even mention, this is something we talked about privately, it was just like how it's really tough to get bags and boards right now.
Yes.
all these different things that no one really realizes are happening. It seems to me that Third Eye Buys is, to a degree, a method of you being able to control your own fate when sometimes when control is taken away from you because of the way of the world.
That's exactly what it is. Like that's it. That's how we function. I mean, like I don't like not having control over something. You know what I mean? Like I like to control the experience of our stores. I like to make sure that the experience is awesome. Coincidentally enough, I'm a big Apple user, so maybe that's that kind of but I don't like the feeling of just saying that's the way it is. And that, with the supply chain issues and things that are beyond a lot of these distributors' control, that's kind of how it can be sometimes, and I don't operate that way. I'm probably the most pleasant and quietest person in comics when it comes to everything, just getting it done. I don't complain or nothing like that. But I I'm also probably the most annoying when it comes to like, well, could we do it this way? Could we do it that way? You know, like I'm very, very civil, very polite about it. But I'm like, well, actually, you know what? I talked to a bunch of logistics companies. I talked to a bunch of freight companies and blah, 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 you know, and like, I'll go do my legwork. I'll do my homework. I don't mind working. I'll work so much, but I want to make sure that it happens. And yeah.
I mean, so I'm not casting aspersions about other people who do comics retail. Like, I understand that it's a complicated job and it's very tough and it's easy to get frustrated with this stuff. But I will say that I've always really appreciated the way that you approach things, because there's kind of like, there's a few different flavors you can take on when things start getting kind of tough. You can publicly complain, which is a 100% valid thing you can do. I understand being upset. But one thing I've always appreciated about you is it seems to me like I ran, you know, we talked at Comics Pro's annual meeting in Portland in 2018. And it seems to me that you're always looking to be constructive about ways that things could be done better and trying to find answers instead of just saying, I wish this was different. You just try to make it different.
Yeah. I just like to do, I that's just me. I just, and that's how I am with pretty much every single thing in my life. Like, how can I do this differently? You know what I mean? How can I, you know, I really, people who know me well, the thing that I don't like hearing from somebody is you can't do this. Like don't tell me that. Do not say you can't do this, you know? Like, I'm like, I will figure out a way, you know?
I can't get you more Killer Klowns figures. You're done.
Right, exactly.
No, you're going to find those Killer Klowns figures.
But no, I mean, like, I mean, that's part of the fun for me too, is like, I mean, like, if I get a challenge thrown my way, I mean, like, it almost always ends up with me in Third Eye being better than we were before, you know, because I figure out things that maybe I'm not doing as well that I could do better, or I figure out new ways to do new things that then make the whole thing better, you know? And that's really how we grow. I mean, like, you know, when you lift weights, you tear your muscles a little bit each time you lift, and then you grow your muscles when they're resting, you know? And, you know, when you're put under stress and you're put into a position where things are kind of, you know, out of whack, you know, you're like, okay, all right, how do I figure this out? How do I deal with this? And then along the way, you usually develop new ways of doing things, new skills, new perspectives that make you better as a whole, you know?
Mm-hmm. So to close, I want to kind of work off of everything we've just been talking about. I mean, it's obviously a weird time. Distribution's crazy. Supply chain's crazy. I mean, everything's crazy. It's weird. I mean, like, depending on how you feel, like there's disruption through things like Substack and through Comixology Originals deals and all these different things that some might say are taken away from the print product. I would not necessarily say that, just because all of those books will eventually come out in print. So, you know, pluses and minuses. But I am interested in where do you think that comics retail is headed? Do you feel like the current state of where things are is a healthy place and that there's a lot of room to grow? Or are we kind of in a transitional state where we don't really know where things are headed? What's your view on things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're in a very, very transitional state. And we don't know. I am not worried about the digital initiatives from like Substack and things like that, because I've always kind of come from the mindset that digital media is a different audience than my audience. And if anything, it might bring people in adjacently that are into it. Webtoons is the big one. And, you know, Lore, our pre-orders on Lore is insane. Like, it's just through the roof, you know? So I have no issues there.
You mean like Lore Olympus?
Yeah. Yeah. Like just through the roof, you know? But I think that, like, the thing that we really, really need to be concerned about is not the Substack thing. I think the thing that we need to be concerned about is the availability of content on a consistent and reliable basis. And if anybody has a you know, a hill that they want to really go after this, like, that's the thing, you know, that's the thing that we really need to be thinking about is, why is Old Man Logan still out of print? Why can't we put that's a book that turns over almost every week?
You mean Miller McNiven?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of print. 6, 7, 8 months. Why is that out of print? Terrible, terrible. The thing is that whether you're a store that barely sells, any graphic novels, or you're a store that sells a ton of graphic novels, there are always going to be trade paperbacks that you can consistently keep in your store, and that guarantee is a nice, solid 50 to 55, whatever margin on that trade, and it's always going to sell. Evergreen books. And those evergreen books over the last 3 to 5 years have been disappearing. And that is something I haven't seen in our industry in a long time. So I am very concerned about that. That's the only thing that I can think of where I'm like, oh, it's not good.
Yeah.
Everything else is it's transitionary, but it's in a good way, where I think that like it's going to open up new audiences and new opportunities, and it's just going to make everybody who loves doing what we do better and stronger because of it. So we'll see.
I mean, the thing that really strikes me as odd about like the Old Man Logan thing, it's like I've talked to shops who told me things like they can't get the first volume of Sandman. And
yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's not like it's, I don't know, no offense to, I don't know, Green Team Trillionaires or whatever that book was from a few years ago for DCU. It's like the first volume of that being out of print, Sandman? What are we even doing here? And so like that stuff was going on before the supply chain issue.
Right. Exactly.
And that's the thing that's odd, because that turns it from something that is an environment created situation into a self-created situation. So the question is why is that happening? Because to me, it's like Marvel's a business. Why would they not want Old Man Logan in print? It's not like it's not going to sell.
And that's the point that I was talking about this 3-4 years ago, about books that aren't strong evergreen turner overs being disregarded and let out of print. I know you can't keep everything in print. I get that. I understand. But there are some books that you have to not strictly go by. I hate to say this is going to make a lot of people who are data obsessed, no offense, but who are data obsessed cringe. But there are some books that you have to look at and you have to say, that's an important story. This was an important crisis, because if you don't, and it should be in every comic book store, or every comic book store should be able to have it. You know what I mean? I don't even know what's in print and not out of print now, because it's gotten so crazy. But what's that?
Unpredictable,
yeah. But for a long time, Blackest Night was out of print. Now that is one of those books that like a 14-year-old kid will be on YouTube watching some videos about comics history and see Larfleeze and see Black Hand and say, I want to go check this out. And they go to a comic book store and you don't have it. Well, that's a problem. Now, Blackest Night might not turn over like it used to, but it is a pivotal part of comics lore from the last 2 decades. It should be in the store, or the store should have the option to stock it. They eventually did put it back into print, which is great. You know what I mean? But the problem is that where does the line get drawn between Cosmic Odyssey, Blackest Night, Old Man Logan? Before you know it, none of these stories, because everything has ups and downs, and like if a trailer drops, Cosmic Odyssey could be the thing that I've never actually read Cosmic Odyssey. People think I'm a huge fan because I always use it as my example, but I've never read it. But Cosmic Odyssey could be something everybody wants. And guess what? Because there's nothing out there, you're missing the boat on new readers. And that's the problem.
I've been convinced for years that Humberto Ramos and Mark Waid's Impulse could be a hit today if they actually released it in the right form. And it's like,
yeah.
And that character is now appearing in the Flash show, I think. Obviously a different version of the character, but it's like they've never reprinted that book. They had a reprint coming, and I think they canceled it. And
I saw it solicited. I don't know if it's still coming or not, but it's not here now.
But it does strike me as odd, because there are all these, like another one I remember hearing that with the Batman Long Halloween coming out as an animated movie.
Yep.
I heard that I couldn't get it. I heard that people couldn't get it, and I was just like, "What?" Like,
and it's also part of the inspiration for the new film.
Yeah, well, and beyond that, there literally was a Batman the Long Halloween special this week.
Yep.
And
couldn't get it.
I something like Long Halloween not being in print is utterly perplexing to me. I don't know if it's out of print or if they're just in between whatever's prints or whatever, but it strikes me as odd because that is one of those ones where it's, let's say I'm a new customer who comes to you and says, I love Batman. Where should I start? Long Halloween's an easy sell.
That's one of the top 5. And it might not be something that turns over every week, like, Killing Joke or Court of Owls. Those turn over way better, but it still, it has its ebbs and its flows, I mean, that's the area where I'm most concerned.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to buy everybody's treats. I'm going to bring them to Third Eye Buys, and I'm just going to say, cool, I'll never run out.
You want to go shopping? I got a big room, Steve.
Hey man, I want to go to Alaska, man. I like nature. I want to get up there and do some crazy stuff.
Well, we got some good nature. If you ever want to come up, I will be more than happy to guide you. But Steve, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about Killer Klowns from Outer Space, Third Eye Comics, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks a lot, brother. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with retailer Steve Anderson. You can find Anderson at his shop, Third Eye Comics, on Third Eye's website at thirdeyecomics.com, and Third Eye basically everywhere on social media. Love Off Panel? Want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site, Sketched at sketch.com, for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content and its members-only forum. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking on Facebook at /Sketched, following on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Nicholas Palmieri, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Brian, Submit Industries, Raj Patel, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Elliot Metz, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Scott Vawan, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePillos, Patrick Brower, Declan Shelby, Dan Garino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Ryan Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, AbductedTheComic.com, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Philip Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pacello, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Danny Ollie, Paul Salates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Gift, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Rob Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.